Rain hammered the cracked windshield as Ethan Cole, a 32-year-old food delivery driver, pulled over near the old Harbor Heights apartments. The GPS blinked weakly on his phone, recalculating again and again. He sighed, wiped the fog off the inside of the window, and whispered, "Building C, Unit 404. That's the last one for tonight." He grabbed the brown paper bag, still warm, and jogged toward the flickering entrance light. The air smelled of wet concrete and distant sea salt. Inside, the hallway was dim, humming with the buzz of an aging fluorescent bulb. He pressed the elevator button. Nothing. As he climbed the stairs, a loud thud echoed above him, then silence. He froze. Another sound followed. Something heavy being dragged. "Hello?" he called, his voice unsure. No answer. Halfway up, his phone vibrated. A text from dispatch. "Order canceled. Customer unreachable. Return to base." He frowned. "After I'm already here?" He turned toward the stairwell window and noticed something. A shadow moving in the rain outside, near a parked black SUV. A man in a hood lifted what looked like a large bag into the trunk, glancing around nervously. Ethan felt a jolt of unease. Then the man's eyes met his, through the rain-streaked glass, a long, cold stare. Startled, Ethan ducked away and hurried downstairs. He jumped into his old Yamaha scooter, heart pounding. As he started the engine, he glanced at his dashcam, the red light still blinking. It had recorded everything. He didn't know it yet, but that footage would soon make him the most wanted man in the city. Not as a suspect, but as the only witness who dared to look twice. That night, the rain didn't stop. Neither did the questions. The next morning, a body was found near the docks, and the police believed the delivery guy had something to do with it. By sunrise, the docks were crawling with police cars and yellow tape. Reporters shouted questions that no one answered. A fisherman, his face weathered by salt and years, said he found the body floating near the pylons. Male, mid-40s, no ID, but the gold cufflinks told enough. This was no ordinary man. Ethan woke up late that morning, unaware that his late-night delivery stop was now a crime scene. He brewed cheap instant coffee, checked his delivery app, and saw something odd. The last address he'd gone to, Building C, Unit 404, was temporarily removed from the system. No reason given. He shrugged it off until he turned on the TV. The newscaster's calm voice cut through the static. "Authorities have identified the victim as Thomas Grayson, a local businessman and philanthropist. Police are urging anyone who may have been in the Harbor Heights area last night to come forward." Ethan froze mid-sip. The image on screen showed the same SUV he'd seen in the rain. His stomach tightened. No way. He played back the footage from his dashcam. The timestamp matched. The man in the hood, the bag, the same vehicle. Everything was there. He hesitated for a long time before whispering, "I should take this to the police." At the precinct, the air was cold and heavy with cigarette smoke. Officer Briggs, a stocky man with a tired face, barely looked up from his paperwork when Ethan explained what he had. "So you're saying you saw a guy moving something near the docks?" "Yes, and I think it's connected. I have dashcam footage." "Dashcam?" Briggs smirked. "You're a delivery guy, right?" "Yeah, but look, kid, half the city's cameras are broken. Everyone thinks they're a detective these days. Leave your number, we'll call you." Ethan left the footage anyway. But something about Briggs's tone gnawed at him. As he walked out, two plainclothes officers whispered behind him. One muttered, "Why's he so eager? Maybe he's trying to cover himself." Outside, the rain started again. Slow, persistent, like the city itself didn't want to forget. Ethan sat on his scooter, staring at the precinct's gray walls. He didn't know that inside his footage would soon be misplaced. Meanwhile, the real killer had already seen the same morning news and realized someone had been watching. The next day, Ethan's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "You shouldn't have recorded that. Delete it before it deletes you." Ethan stared at the message, his thumb trembling over the screen. No sender ID, no name, just that single, chilling line. He looked around his tiny apartment. The leaking ceiling, the pile of unpaid bills, the humming refrigerator that always sounded like a distant whisper. Everything felt suddenly unsafe. He replayed the footage again, this time frame by frame. The hooded man's face was still too dark to make out, but when the SUV's trunk opened, the dashcam caught a reflection, a glimpse of a silver watch with a broken strap. He paused, zoomed in, and took a screenshot. That's when his phone vibrated again. This time, from Detective Laura Hayes. "Mr. Cole, this is Detective Hayes. You visited the Harbor Heights complex last night?" "Yes, I think I saw something." I gave the footage to Officer Briggs. "Briggs?" There was a pause. "We don't have any record of your submission." Ethan's heart sank. "What do you mean? Can you bring another copy?" He swallowed hard. "Yeah, I can." At the precinct, Hayes greeted him with cautious eyes. She was in her late 30s, professional but human, the kind of detective who still believed people mattered more than cases. Ethan handed over the memory card. She plugged it in and watched in silence. After a moment, she said quietly, "You were right. This matches the time the victim disappeared, but the vehicle... It's registered to the Grayson Foundation, the victim's own company." Ethan frowned. "So the killer used his car?" Hayes nodded slowly. "Or maybe he didn't die where we found him." Before she could say more, another officer entered and whispered something in her ear. Her expression changed. "Mr. Cole, where's your original dashcam? The one you took this from?" "On my scooter." "Why?" "Because your name just came up in the internal report. Someone filed a note. You're being listed as a person of interest." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. "What? I'm the one who reported this." "I know," Hayes said, standing up, "but someone doesn't want your footage to exist." Outside the precinct, a black sedan idled near the curb. The driver wore a raincoat, the same kind Ethan had seen that night. As Ethan stepped out, the engine roared to life and the car began to follow him. He gripped his scooter handle and whispered to himself, "They're not going to silence me." The chase through the wet streets of the city had begun, not with sirens, but with quiet fear and the hum of a small engine outrunning the weight of a lie. That night, Detective Hayes opened a confidential file. Inside was a note. "Case number 47B, witness Ethan Cole, compromised evidence, do not proceed." Detective Laura Hayes sat in the dark of her office long after everyone else had left. The rain had quieted, but the storm inside her mind hadn't. She reread the note 3 times. "Witness Ethan Cole, compromised evidence, do not proceed." The signature at the bottom was smudged, but she recognized the initials, CB, Captain Briggs. Hayes leaned back, rubbing her temples. Why would Briggs shut this down? Meanwhile, across town, Ethan sat at a 24-hour diner, his scooter parked outside under a broken streetlight. He hadn't gone home. His dashcam, his only proof, lay on the seat beside him, wrapped in an old towel. He stirred his coffee without drinking it, watching the few customers around. 2 men in plain suits sat by the door, pretending to read newspapers. He'd seen them before. Same faces near his building that morning, same expressionless eyes. His phone buzzed again. "Mr. Cole, it's Hayes. We need to meet. Privately." He typed back fast. "Name the place," she replied. "Pier 12, after midnight. Don't bring your phone." Ethan stared at the message. Don't bring your phone? That sounded less like a meeting and more like survival advice. At 12:04 a.m., he reached the docks. The fog rolled in, heavy, muffling every sound except the lapping of waves. Hayes stood by an old container, her coat pulled tight. "You came," she said quietly. "Didn't have much choice," he replied. She handed him a small envelope. Inside were printouts, screenshots from internal police logs. Ethan's name was circled in red. Next to it, possible suspect, evidence inconsistent. "They're framing me?" he asked. "Someone's trying to. The original memory card you submitted is gone. Logged as missing during transfer. Briggs signed it out himself. So, the footage that could clear me is in the wrong hands." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we find another way." Hayes nodded. "You still have the dash cam?" He lifted his backpack. "I kept the backup copy." Before she could respond, the sound of tires screeched nearby. Headlights cut through the fog. Hayes whispered, "Run." They sprinted behind the containers as bullets cracked through metal, not to kill, but to warn. The sedan from before rolled closer, stopping beside the pier. A man stepped out, tall, wearing the same silver watch with the broken strap. Ethan's pulse hammered. "That's him, the man from the video." Hayes pulled her gun, but the man only smirked, raising his hands casually. "Detective Hayes. Still chasing ghosts, I see." "Who are you?" she demanded. "Just someone making sure stories like his never reach the news." He turned toward Ethan, eyes cold and unhurried. "You recorded something you weren't supposed to, delivery boy. Be smart. Forget it." Then he stepped back into the car and vanished into the fog. Hayes lowered her weapon, breathing hard. "Whoever he is, he's connected to the department. We're in over our heads." Ethan looked at her, the city lights flickering in the distance. "Then we go public. If they bury evidence, we make the truth impossible to hide." Hayes met his eyes. "You're risking everything. So are you." The file took 8 minutes to upload. Ethan watched the progress bar crawl across his cracked laptop screen inside a rented storage unit on the city's east side. He'd chosen the place because it had no cameras, no Wi-Fi logs, no neighbors awake enough to ask questions. The footage, now backed up on a foreign server, was encrypted and scheduled for public release if he didn't manually stop it within 48 hours. He leaned back, exhausted. For the first time since that night, he felt a thin layer of safety until he heard footsteps outside. A shadow passed the narrow slit of light under the door. He reached for his phone, then stopped. No service. A quiet knock followed, 3 slow taps. Ethan held his breath. "It's me," came a voice. Detective Hayes. She stepped in, coat drenched, eyes sharp. "You've made yourself a target," she said. "I can handle it." "No, you can't. The man you saw, his name's Richard Vale. He's Grayson's business partner, and he's got friends in places that erase people." "So why help me?" Ethan asked. Hayes hesitated. "Because I once buried a case like this. I won't do it again." She placed a folded file on the table. Inside were photos of Briggs shaking hands with Vale, dated 2 weeks before Grayson's death. He's not just covering a crime. He's part of it. Ethan ran his hand through his hair. "If we release this, they'll come after both of us." Hayes looked at him. "Then we don't release it yet. We use it." Suddenly, her phone buzzed. An encrypted message flashed across the screen. "Internal affairs initiated. You're compromised. Leave city." Hayes cursed under her breath. "They're on to me." Ethan shut his laptop and shoved it into his bag. "Then we go now." They slipped into the night, rain drizzling like static over the dim alleys. As they reached the street, a black SUV turned the corner, the same one from the dashcam. Hayes grabbed his arm. "This way." They ducked into an underpass, engines echoing above. Ethan's pulse raced. He whispered, "How long before they trace the upload?" "Not long," Hayes replied. "Unless we find proof inside the department first." He frowned. "Proof?" "Briggs keeps a secondary drive, one he doesn't log. If we get that, we can end this." "And where would he keep it?" "In his locker, precinct basement." Ethan exhaled sharply. "We're breaking into a police station now?" Hayes nodded. "If you want the truth, yes." The city lights flickered across wet pavement as they vanished into the dark, 2 outcasts chasing a truth no one wanted to see. The countdown on Ethan's laptop continued, 46 hours left. At dawn, a new video quietly uploaded to a private server, the dashcam footage, now backed up and encrypted. Ethan didn't know it yet, but that single upload would ignite a war between truth and power. They arrived at the precinct just past 2 a.m., and when the building was nearly empty except for the graveyard shift, Hayes led the way through the rear parking lot, swiping her ID card at a service entrance. "We have 6 minutes before the system logs the access," she whispered. The fluorescent hallway smelled of bleach and old coffee. Every footstep echoed too loud. Ethan followed, trying not to stare at the walls lined with framed commendations. One of them showed Captain Briggs shaking hands with the mayor. They reached the basement level. Rows of metal lockers stood in silence, each labeled with a number. Hayes stopped at the one marked C. Briggs, 41. She took out a small toolkit, whispering, 2 minutes. Ethan's hands shook as he kept lookout. Somewhere above, a phone rang and went silent. The lock clicked. Hayes opened the door and froze. Inside wasn't a drive. It was a folder, sealed with police tape, marked Grayson Case, Evidence. She flipped it open. Inside were crime scene photos, bank transfers, and a printed email chain between Vale and Briggs discussing liquidation and containment. Ethan whispered, "So it was about money." "Not just money," Hayes said, scanning the text. Grayson was about to expose his partner's laundering network. Vale had him killed, and Briggs cleaned it up. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Hayes stuffed the papers into her coat. "Go." They slipped into the utility tunnel behind the lockers as a flashlight beam cut across the corridor. "Who's there?" a voice barked. They stayed silent. The beam passed inches from Ethan's face, then moved on. The officer left. Hayes exhaled. "Too close." They exited through a side door leading into the alley. The night air hit them like cold metal. Ethan said, "We have what we need. Let's take it to internal affairs." Hayes shook her head. "Not yet. If Briggs knows we took that file, IA will bury it before it sees daylight. We leak it, but only when we're safe." Ethan frowned. "Where is safe?" Hayes hesitated. "There's an old contact of mine, journalist named Marla Dunn. If anyone can publish this, it's her." "Then let's go." As they walked toward the scooter, Ethan noticed a red laser dot moving across the wall beside them. "Down," he shouted. A shot cracked through the air, hitting a trash bin behind them. Hayes drew her gun, scanning the rooftops, but the shooter was gone. Ethan's ears rang. "They're not trying to scare us anymore." Hayes nodded grimly. No, they're cleaning up. She handed him the folder. If something happens to me, you run. He shook his head. Not without you. She gave a faint, tired smile. Let's hope you don't have to choose. They disappeared into the neon blur of the city, hunted and unseen, carrying the last fragments of a truth too dangerous to keep. Marla Dunn lived on the 14th floor of a decaying office tower that once housed a local newspaper. Her desk was cluttered with old hard drives, paper notes, and a flickering monitor that hummed like a secret. When Hayes and Ethan arrived, she barely looked up. "You're late," she said, cigarette smoke curling around her face. "And you brought company." Hayes dropped the evidence folder on the table. "You're the only one I trust to run this." Marla scanned a few pages, her eyes narrowing. Grayson, Vale, Briggs, all the same names from 5 years ago, the fraud investigation that went nowhere. You're telling me the same crew's still active? And they killed Grayson when he tried to expose them, Ethan said. We have dashcam footage, financial records, even their internal emails. Marla leaned back, exhaling. You two have no idea how deep this goes. Vale funds half the city council. Briggs runs protection. If this leaks wrong, they'll burn every trace before it hits the net. And Hayes replied, That's why we need your network. Not just a post. An investigation. Documented, time-stamped, mirrored. Marla smirked. You sound like a journalist. No, Hayes said quietly. I sound like someone who's done hiding. She nodded toward Ethan. He's the reason this exists. The footage started it all. Marla studied him for a moment. You risked your life for a stranger's murder. Why? Ethan hesitated. Because I know what it's like when nobody listens. The room fell silent except for the hum of servers. Then Marla stood. All right, give me the drives. I'll start uploading across 4 secure nodes, but once it's live, you can't undo it. Hayes looked at Ethan. He nodded. Do it. As Marla began typing, the lights flickered. Then, blackout. The hum stopped. Darkness swallowed the room. A second later, a single flashlight beam cut through the smoke. Hayes drew her gun. Backup power's offline, Marla muttered. That never happens. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Ethan moved toward the window, peering through the blinds. 3 men in tactical gear, no badges, moving fast. They found us, he whispered. Hayes grabbed the evidence folder, shoved it into Ethan's hands. Go down the fire escape. What about you? I'll hold them. You'll get killed. She smirked faintly. Not tonight. As he climbed out into the rain, the door burst open behind him. A gunshot rang out. He turned just in time to see Hayes fire back before the door slammed shut. Marla shouted, Run, kid! Ethan hit the wet steel of the fire escape, descending as boots pounded above him. Every shadow felt alive. He didn't know if Hayes had made it out. All he knew was that the world now wanted one thing, the drive in his pocket. And as thunder rolled above the city, Ethan Cole disappeared into the night, carrying truth like contraband. By morning, Ethan's face was on the news. The anchor's voice was calm, rehearsed. Police are searching for a suspect in connection with the death of philanthropist Thomas Grayson. The man, identified as Ethan Cole, is considered armed and dangerous. A grainy photo of him from his delivery profile filled the screen. He stared at it through a bus window, hood up, backpack clutched tight. A mother pulled her child closer when she noticed him. He turned away. Every TV in the city was showing the same lie. He got off near the river and ducked into an abandoned subway tunnel that reeked of oil and rust. His mind raced. Hayes, Marla, are they alive? He checked the drive again, still dry, still intact. That small rectangle of plastic now held everything. His proof, his curse. His phone vibrated, 1 bar of signal, a message. Unknown, Pier 12, tonight. Bring the drive if you want the detective to live. Ethan stared at the screen, rain dripping from his hood. They have her. At dusk, he reached the pier. The same one where it all began. The fog rolled low and heavy. A black SUV waited, headlights on. Vale stepped out, immaculate in a tailored coat, that same broken silver watch glinting under the light. Behind him stood 2 armed men, and Hayes, on her knees, wrists bound. Mr. Cole, Vale said, his voice smooth like glass. You're a very persistent man. Let her go, Ethan shouted. I will, when you give me what's mine. It's not yours, Vale smiled faintly. You think this is about justice? You think the world cares about your little video? You'll die before they believe you. Hayes met Ethan's eyes. She mouthed, Don't. But before he could answer, Vale gestured to one of his men. The thug stepped forward, grabbing Hayes by the arm. Last chance. Ethan took a slow breath, pretending to reach into his bag, but instead he pressed a small button on his phone. Vale frowned. What did you do? Ethan's voice was steady now. You wanted the footage. You'll get it. It's streaming live. Far across the city, in a tiny backup server Marla had rigged, the upload timer hit 0. Within seconds, the video began broadcasting across multiple news feeds, the dashcam footage, the conversation with Hayes, the proof of corruption. Vale's face filled every major outlet. The men hesitated, confused. Vale's calm cracked. Turn it off, when he barked. You can't, Ethan said. It's everywhere now. Vale's fury ignited. He lunged forward, grabbing Ethan by the collar. You don't understand what you've done. Yeah, Ethan whispered. I finally made someone listen. A siren wailed in the distance. Then another. Flashing blue lights cut through the fog. Hayes took the chance, slammed her shoulder into the guard beside her, knocking him off balance. Gunfire erupted, chaotic and blind. Ethan ducked behind a crate. Hayes shouted, Go! He ran toward the pier's edge, clutching the drive. Behind him, Vale's men scattered as police cars closed in. The city that once ignored him was now watching everything unfold, live. When the gunfire stopped, the pier was empty. Only the sound of waves and sirens remained. Hours later, in a news broadcast replay, Detective Hayes' voice trembled slightly as she spoke. The evidence came from one man, a delivery driver who refused to stay silent, and somewhere beyond the city lights, Ethan Cole rode alone through the rain, unknown, hunted, but free, the man who turned a dashcam into truth. The city didn't sleep that night. Every screen flickered with the leaked footage. The SUV at the docks, the silver watch, Vale's voice, and the cold precision of corruption laid bare. Social media exploded with the same words, #Justice for Grayson. News vans lined the streets outside police headquarters. The chief held a midnight press conference, his voice tight. An internal investigation is underway. Several officers have been placed on leave, pending review. What he didn't say, what everyone already knew, was that Captain Briggs was missing. Ethan watched from a motel room miles away, wrapped in silence. His phone buzzed. One message from an unknown number. She's safe. He exhaled for the first time in days. Hayes had survived. He turned up the volume, watching reporters crowd around Vale's estate as armed agents raided the property. Boxes of documents, drives, and cash were carried out under floodlights. Vale himself was nowhere to be found. Then, a knock at the motel door. Ethan froze. Slowly, he peeked through the peephole. Hayes. She looked exhausted, her hair damp from rain, coat torn. You made it, she said softly. You too, he replied. She stepped in and closed the door. They're coming for you next, she said. Half the department still thinks you're part of it. I figured, he said. Guess I'll be on the road for a while. Hayes sat down, staring at the muted TV. You know, when I joined the force, I thought truth had a home somewhere inside the system. And now? Now I think it lives wherever someone like you refuses to shut up. He smiled faintly, though his eyes looked tired. I wasn't brave. I was just there. Hayes shook her head. No, you were the only one who didn't look away. On the screen behind them, Vale's photo appeared with the headline, International Warrant Issued, Police Captain Linked to Disappearance. Justice for once wasn't whispered. It was broadcast. Ethan packed his few belongings into a worn backpack, phone, charger, helmet, and the now empty hard drive. Where will you go? Hayes asked. Somewhere quiet, maybe fix bikes again. You know this isn't over. It never is. She stood, handing him a folded piece of paper. If you ever need to reach me, that's a private line. Don't text. Call once. He took it. Thanks, Detective. She smirked faintly. Just call me Laura. Outside, the first light of dawn stretched across the wet streets. Hayes watched as Ethan climbed onto his scooter, engine sputtering. You'll disappear, she said. He looked back. That's the plan. He rode off down the empty avenue, the reflection of red and blue lights fading behind him. For a moment, the city seemed to breathe again. In a small cafe across town, a TV replayed the footage one last time. A barista muttered to a coworker, Crazy world. A delivery guy did what the whole department couldn't. The coworker shrugged, eyes still fixed on the screen. Guess heroes don't always wear badges. And somewhere on the highway, Ethan Cole smiled to himself. Not because he was free, but because for once, the truth was louder than the lie. Weeks passed. The city returned to its rhythm, cars honking, headlines changing, people moving on. But beneath the surface, the story of Ethan Cole lingered like a quiet legend. The footage had forced resignations, criminal charges, and new investigations into police corruption. Vale was still missing. Briggs had been found dead in a motel room 2 towns away, ruled a suicide, though no one really believed it. Detective Hayes, reinstated and quietly promoted, sat before a government inquiry panel, answering each question with steady resolve. When asked how she first learned of the cover-up, she simply replied, "From someone everyone ignored." The room fell silent. That evening, she walked along the riverfront where it had all begun. The city lights shimmered on the black water. She took out her phone and scrolled to a contact labeled E. Cole, but she didn't call. Instead, she typed a message. "They finally reopened Grayson's foundation, in your name." Then she hesitated and deleted it. Hundreds of miles away, Ethan had started again. In a small coastal town, he worked at a motorcycle repair shop, living above it in a room that smelled of oil and sea air. His days were quiet, fixing engines, helping locals, keeping his head down. Yet sometimes, when a car pulled up late or a stranger lingered too long, his pulse still raced. One afternoon, a courier truck rolled to a stop outside. The driver, a kid barely 20, handed him a sealed envelope. Delivery for Ethan Cole. No return address. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a photo, the same one from the case file, of Grayson smiling beside a community center, and a single note. He believed truth mattered, so did you. He looked out toward the horizon, the ocean wind pushing against his face. Somewhere, he heard the faint hum of sirens far away, like echoes of a world he'd already left behind. He whispered, almost to himself, "Guess that's one delivery that finally reached the right place." The next morning, his scooter was gone from the shop. Neighbors said he left before sunrise, no one knew where. Some said he went south. Others believed he joined an investigation unit under a new name. But for those who remembered the story, one thing was certain. Ethan Cole didn't vanish. He became a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the smallest witness can expose the biggest lie. That courage doesn't shout. It records. And as a late-night news anchor closed her broadcast weeks later, she ended with a line that stayed in the city's memory for years to come. He wasn't a cop, a lawyer, or a politician. He was just a delivery guy. But when no one else would, he brought the truth home. Epilogue. Echoes of Truth. Months later, the storm that had shaken the city became just another headline in archives. New scandals rose, old ones faded, but in corners of the internet, on small community forums and citizen journal pages, people still shared Ethan Cole's footage. A grainy dashcam clip that had once changed everything. They called it the eye that wouldn't blink. Students studied it in ethics classes. Journalists cited it in press freedom debates. Somewhere along the way, the name Ethan Cole became shorthand for conscience, the ordinary man who refused to look away. Detective Laura Hayes visited Grayson's rebuilt foundation on a gray afternoon. A plaque by the entrance read, "For those who risk truth when silence is safer." Inside, a group of volunteers prepared food packages for the homeless, the kind of deliveries Ethan used to make. She stood for a while, then smiled faintly. For all the damage, something good had grown from it. Later that night, as she walked to her car, a courier bike zipped past, the rider wearing a worn helmet and an old brown jacket. For a second, the silhouette looked familiar. The same posture, the same quiet confidence. She blinked, but the rider was already gone, swallowed by the city lights. A part of her wanted to believe it was him. She sat in the car and whispered, "Good luck, Ethan," then drove off. Far from the city, on a winding coastal road, a man on a scooter rode beneath the fading sun, the ocean glittering beside him. His phone buzzed once, an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "Another case, another truth. Are you in?" He smiled quietly and accelerated into the wind, because sometimes the fight for truth doesn't end with one story. It just finds a new delivery route. Night draped itself over the coastline as Ethan's scooter carved through the mist, the headlight slicing a thin path along the empty road. He had no destination, only a direction. Forward. The sound of the ocean kept time with the engine, like the world itself urging him not to stop. He pulled over by a cliffside diner, the kind that stayed open only for truckers and wanderers. Inside, a small TV replayed an old interview with Detective Hayes. Her voice was calm, resolute. "Justice doesn't need heroes. It just needs someone to care enough to stay when everyone else walks away." Ethan smiled faintly, recognizing the conviction he once carried in his own trembling hands. The waitress poured him coffee. "You look like you've been on the road forever," she said. "Something like that," he replied. "Heading anywhere?" "Nowhere in particular." She nodded. "Sometimes that's the best place to go." He left a few bills on the counter and stepped outside. The horizon glowed faintly where dawn began to touch the water. He took out his phone one last time, scrolling through the remnants of encrypted threads, deleted names, coded contacts, unread messages, and then powered it off. The world didn't need to know where he went next. It just needed to remember that truth could come from anyone, anywhere, even a delivery man who refused to look away. As he kicked the engine to life, the wind caught his jacket and lifted the corners of an old patch sewn to the back. A faded logo from the company he once worked for, barely legible now but still visible under the morning light. We deliver. The road stretched endlessly before him, quiet, clean, and waiting. And with that, Ethan Cole disappeared once more into the rising sun. Not as a fugitive, not as a hero, but as the quiet proof that courage sometimes looks like persistence. And that every truth, no matter how small, deserves to be delivered.